Nate, before you get into the call, I don't want to take too long with this, but I was confused. Again, if you guys are CLP subscribers, we have Discord, which is the way that we sort of discuss real time. It's a community over on CrushLivePoker, real time hands and things like that. And there was a discussion over in the general channel about running it more than once and a little bit of confusion. Before you tell me what the discussion was, I will say that I do find it a little bit interesting because somebody had actually pointed this out to me on YouTube about 6 months ago. And then I started thinking about it and I was actually incorrect. Number one, obviously running it more than once does not change the equity of your overall result whatsoever. And what I mean by that, I'm not going to go too far down this road, is that if the pot's $1,000 and you have 30% equity and you run it one time, your EV is $300. If you run it 2 times, your EV is $300. If you run it 3 times, your EV is $300. The only thing that running it more than once does is it will allow the overall result to actually approach what the EV in the hand is. Meaning that if you run a spot 3 times in a $1,000 pot and you're 30%, the most likely outcome is that you're going to win 1 out of 3. Which means that you'll end up with 333, which approaches the $300 in EV. Because if you just run it once, there's 2 results, 100 or 0. Where it's interesting and where I've never actually talked about this though before is that, and I'll use this really, really simply, the equity does change as the cards are run on each run. And what I mean by that is that if you are 50-50 in a $1,000 pot, and you run the board 3 times, your EV is $500, right? Now you would think, oh, if I'm 50-50, what are the chances that I'll win all 3? Well, you can look at it like a coin flip, right? You're like, well, how often am I going to flip heads 3 times in a row? And it's just 2 to the 3rd power. So flipping heads, once is, 1 out of 2, 1 out of 4, 1 out of 8, which is about 12.5%. But it does not work that way with running it more than once because of the conditions of the cards. If you are 50-50 in a situation and you run it twice, the chances of you winning both is not 25%, like you would think flipping a coin twice, because when you win the first one, you have less of a chance of winning the second one. Where people get confused, however, is that if they win the first one, they have already achieved 50% of the pot. Because when you're running a pot that's $1,000, you're splitting it into 2 $500 pots. So if I win the first one, I'm already up 500. The chances I win the second one have gone down. I do not have a 50% chance to win the second one because of card removal. But that does not change the overall equity before the runs. There's a really famous hand that I actually commentated on back in 2009 from the Aussie Millions. And they used to have it up in high quality on YouTube, but it's taken down. But there's like some private people that have it up. So you can just do a search on Patrick Antonius versus Roble, run it 4 times in PLO. But it was a situation in PLO in this cash game where Antonius and Roble got it all in on the flop. And what it basically was Antonius had 9, 8, 6, 5 with 3 diamonds. So like a connecting middling card, and Roble had ace, queen, queen, jack. And the board had come out ace, 4, 7 with 2 diamonds. So Antonius had this just monster wrap hand. Like he could have caught a 3, a 5, an 8, a 6. He also had some backdoor straightening outs and diamonds. He had 3 diamonds in his hand. Anyways, the point was that Roble got it in with Antonius. I don't know if it was one of the first times that Roble had actually ever played PLO, because it was really, really bizarre when you take a look at the hand. But Antonius was a 73% favorite to win, basically. And they decided to run it 4 times. The reason why they ran it 4 instead of 3 is in PLO, you can have chops. So if you run it an odd number of times, it can sort of slow the game down. It gets complicated. So usually running it like 2 or 4 times is the best one. And what ended up happening, so they ran it 4 times. And somehow Roble, as a 27%, he had 27% equity, he won all 4 runs. Now, when I was doing the commentary at the time, over 10 years ago, I was just like, oh, this is really easy to figure out. It's just 0.27 basically to the fourth, 27%, times 27% times 27% times 27%. And it's less than 1% that you would win that. And that's true. That is what 0.27 is to the fourth. However, it's actually worse than that. It's worse than that for Roble, because every single run that Roble wins is going to burn basically these blank cards that he needs to come, because Antonius had a huge draw. I mean, Antonius made the draw a couple times, and then Roble made a backdoor flush or made a full house. But the point being is that, again, the overall equity before the runs isn't really going to change anything. Like, that pot that they played was $262,000, which means that the equity for Antonius was right around 191,260, and Roble 70,740. I'll put a link to the video in this description, and that's at 27% to 73%. That's what, if they were going to chop the EV, that's basically what it would have been. But when they run it 4 times, they play 4 $65,500 pots, not one $262,000 pot. The most likely outcome, which is the reason why you run it more than once, at say 27 to 73 as a matchup, is that Antonius would win 3 of 4. Sometimes they would go 2 and 2. Once in a great while, somebody would scoop. Usually it's going to be Antonius as the favorite. And then once out of every 5 or 10,000 situations, Roble scoops. But the thing with Roble is that when he wins the first run, he's achieved 25% of the pot, but he's burned some of those dead cards. So then his odds go down subsequently to win the second run. Well, he won the second run. They go down again on the third run, but he's already won half the pot after winning the first 2 runs. So this is the confusion with running it more than once. There is no mathematical difference before the runs are out. And in an extreme example, you can look at this, if you have top set and somebody has middle set, so it's set over set, and you guys get it all in on the turn, the guy with the lower set only has 1 out, right? So if you run it twice, he can't win both runs. If you run it once, he can win the entire pot. If you run it 3 times, he can only win 1 time. The more times you run it, the more opportunity that he has to win at least some of the pot. So if you were to run it, say, 10 times, sometimes he might win 1/10 the pot. When he wins 1/10 the pot, the other 9 times, he's going to win 0. There's no way for him to win all of the runs. But when you look at the actual equity before the runs, it doesn't change anything. If the pot's $1,000 and it's set over set, and a guy has 1 out with 1 card to come, and we'll just do it dirty, meaning that he's got 2%, right? His equity in the pot is $20. If you run it once and he wins the entire thing, he wins 1,000. If if he loses, you win 0. If you run it 20 times, his equity is still $20. If you were able to run a $1,000 pot 20 times, basically you are playing 20 $50 pots. If he were to win one of those pots, he would win 50. He would be actually running above expectation. If you could somehow run it 40 times, you would be playing 40 $25 pots. If you won one, you would win $25 one time and lose the rest. So the more times you run it, the closer the result will be to the actual EV before the runs. but it makes absolutely no difference mathematically. There was a situation a few years ago on Live at the Bike, and I actually defended Harry. There was this huge controversy maybe 2 or 3 years ago where Harry had like top pair, and Chris, who used to be a regular on Live at the Bike, like had middle set. So Harry was like, he was like a 95% dog, okay? So they get it all in on the flop somehow. Harry has like some bad kicker. It's like 8-3 against like a set of sevens or something like that. And they get it all in. They call, and Chris is like, Harry, you want to run it 3 times? And Harry's like, yeah, I'll run it 3 times. And then Harry was like, wait a minute, what do you have? And Chris turned over his hand, and it was a set. It was middle set of sevens. And of course, Harry just had top pair. And Harry's like, oh shit, you have a set? Forget it. I'm just going to run it once. Now, people somehow thought that that was an angle by Harry because he knew that Chris had a set. It's not an angle. It didn't change anything. By Harry only running it once instead of 3 times, he gives himself the opportunity to win the entire pot or nothing. 95 out of 100 times, he's going to win 0. 5 out of 100 times, he's going to win the entire pot. If they run it, say, 3 times like they were originally going to do, maybe he had like a 30 or 40% chance of winning 1/3 of the pot. But the fact that he changed his mind after the cards were tabled really didn't mean anything mathematically. Whether or not you want to say, oh, that's not kosher or whatever, that's a different discussion. But people were up in arms. They thought it was like the worst angle, one of the worst angles like in the history of poker, when in fact it changed absolutely nothing. And of course, if I'm talking about this, you know what must have happened. They ran it once and Harry made a backdoor flush and scooped the entire pot. Now, Nate, on the phone, what was the discussion or what was your confusion?
It was actually, I just don't like to run it twice because I feel like it influences people to jam on you lighter.
Okay.
To call your bluffs down.
Okay.
Lighter.
Okay.
And that basically, if I'm coming into a pot and I already laid the odds, I know that I have a great chance of walking out of here with 0.
Okay.
The whole pot.
Okay.
And I would rather walk out with the whole pot than half the pot because I'm going to handle that better if I have 0.
I mean, then I 100% agree with you in terms of it. So this is my take on running it more than once. And the reason why, if I have any real option or any real choice, I don't like to do it. I think I have better mental game than the next guy. Meaning that if I have aces and somebody else has kings and we get it in for 10,000, okay, and we run it once and I lose, that's going to affect me way, way less than the other guy. So why would I want to run it twice? Or vice versa. If I have kings and they have aces and they lose and they go on tilt, it is going to affect them way more than me. So why would I run it more than once? Now, what's interesting with me living in Texas now, though, is that, and a lot of these places not having boxes, although apparently the Lodge is going to have a box, is that like I got called to play the Lodge's 5-10 game. I played it over the weekend this past 2 weeks ago. I did a nice session, had like 5K. I don't like to keep that much money in my house. You know what I mean? Cash. This is not like I'm living in LA like in Commerce where like I had a Commerce box. So it's 5-10. So let's say I only have like, I don't know, 10,000 around or whatever it is. I had some Lodge chips and some cash. Okay. Let's say I'm going to bring 10 or 15,000 to the Lodge and I'm going to buy in for 8 or 10,000. That's all the money I have. It's not all the money that I have in my life. It's all the money I have right then in the session. So maybe I would run it more than once in a given situation because I wouldn't want to not be able to play anymore, right? By the way, the other thing that I floated out there, though I haven't really gotten much of a response, is that if anybody knows me in Texas and I'm going to play on a live stream coming up, or you hear that I'm going to play, I will absolutely sell Bitcoin for cash. If they were going to play, like I know that the Lodge does like a big 25-50 game I think, at the end of the month. My preference, instead of going and selling like fucking Vanguard ETFs to get 30,000 or 50,000 in cash to play on a live stream for 4 hours, my preference is for somebody to give me lodge chips or cash, and I will send them Bitcoin. That's my preference.